Welcome to Authors and Innovators. I'm Larry Gennari of Gennari Aronson, a boutique law firm focused on helping innovative companies and the entrepreneurs who run them become more successful. We're the curators of Authors and Innovators, now in our 6th year. Thanks for joining us. I want to thank our sponsors, American Student Assistance and the Boston Business Journal, for raising the profile of this terrific event. We're continuing Authors and Innovators this year in a slightly different format. Some recorded content, which you'll listen to now, and also 3 terrific live events, which we hope you'll join later this week. To learn more, check out authorsinnovators.org. This year, our theme for Authors and Innovators is on the economy and the workforce of the future, and more specifically on the pressing need for young people to pursue a variety of career, college, or entrepreneurial pathways to pursue their passions, reshape local economies, and rebuild their communities, and to think about the economy and their future in it in a different and meaningful way. Hope you'll enjoy the content, and please leave comments at galawpartners.com or authorsandinnovators.org.
Authors and Innovators is more than a book festival or a business event. It's about promoting ideas on leadership and business and life. The Boston Business Journal is a proud sponsor of Authors and Innovators, now in our 6th year, and it's been a pleasure to support new ideas and innovation together. This year, with a focus on the economy and the workforce of the future, I can guarantee you're going to learn something that will make it time well spent. So come to one or more of the events, watch online, and be sure to read our regular Authors and Innovators column in the Boston Business Journal. And I'll see you there.
Welcome again to Authors and Innovators. I'm very pleased to welcome Harvard Business School professor George Serafeim, whose research focuses on measuring, driving, and communicating corporate performance and social impact. He's been thinking and thinks a lot about environmental, social, and governance strategy, and more importantly, implementation. He's also the author of the new book, Purpose and Profit: How Business Can Lift Up the World. So, Professor Serafeim, I really enjoyed this. You seem to cover 2 broad themes. Why corporate purpose and ESG issues have become more important over time, and also what can we all do to drive purpose and profit in our own organizations. So why and how did this come to matter to you?
Larry, first of all, thank you very much for having me. It's a great pleasure to be here. Why did I write this book? I'm extremely passionate about this topic, and my passion comes from, I would say, human potential. That I have seen it in my students over more than a decade right now, that have gone to actually apply business skills to create businesses as entrepreneurs around the world that have provided access and opportunity, both from a capital perspective, for example, in venture capital markets, but also from an employment perspective, creating technology platforms that have created more access and opportunity for jobs and for meeting demand and supply for skills for traditionally underprivileged parts of the population. At the same time, I have seen lots of people doing amazing things, scaling up new businesses, for example, to help us lower carbon emissions in the economy, from food and agriculture when it comes to soil degradation, to creating electrification in the transportation sector, scaling up the production of batteries and new technologies and so forth. So I have seen incredible, actually, you can say, things. Of course, that doesn't mean that we don't have incredible challenges in front of us. There is a lot of work that needs to be done still, but incredible potential. And where does this all come from? It comes from actually all of us willing to engage in very tough problems. And that is the purpose part. That is actually what is driving us to the destination of actually providing solutions to the world's challenges and collaborating and creating new value chains, new models, and unleashing our creative potential to that. But, Larry, at the same time, we need to recognize that to reach the destination of purpose, we need to fuel that destination. And the fuel to the destination is profit. So we need, at the same time, to apply the management, the governance, the technical skills, the analytical skills, the social skills, the leadership skills to enable us to get there. So for me, the book is actually summarizing what has changed in the world, why actually what the past was is not going to be the future, and then what is the role that we all have as part of that conversation.
Well, let's talk about that. You talk early in the book, and you argue that trends are aligning business and societal goals in a way that's never happened before. And so, do you see the end of sort of shareholder primacy with the only metric being share price? You've interviewed more than 400 companies and 500,000 people for this book. What are those kind of trends, and how are they aligning?
So I think a really important trend, Larry, not the only one, but a really important one has been technology. Technology has done fundamentally two things for us. It has expanded transparency around the world. When you think about, for example, what we're doing right now, internet and social media and the digitization of the world has actually created an unprecedented level of transparency. Alongside also, if you think about it, the satellite imaging that allows us to understand locally what is happening in the world, to track pollution levels, how cars are moving, censoring around buildings, to have an unprecedented level of transparency that we wouldn't be able to have before, from things that we all use every day in our life, like smart thermostats, right, and so forth. But actually, technology has also enabled something else, which is the expansion of choice. Choice both in product markets as consumers. You go to the supermarket and you have like 100 different brands to choose from, and that actually has expanded the availability of alternatives. So if you don't like one brand, you can go with another brand and so forth. But also in labor markets, right? What we're doing right now, the availability of LinkedIn and Indeed and many of those platforms have expanded the availability of choice in labor markets. So you don't like this employer, to the extent that you're at least have some basic level of skills, it has been much easier for you to actually move around companies. So that expansion of transparency and choice has actually created more voice among many, many stakeholders. Because if you actually don't know what is going on, and if you don't have alternatives, how can you have voice? You don't have voice, right? You're actually a prisoner of wherever you are, right? So, and that actually voice is increasingly impacting the competitiveness of organizations. Why? Because increasingly, most of the value in organizations is driven by what? Actually, attracting somebody like Larry, who is super skilled in an organization, and you want to retain Larry. And you want 20 different people like that, so they can come together and they can create intellectual capital inside the organization. And then you create brands, products that people love, and that creates also social capital for the organization, trust in the organization, levels of trust from the customers and the society and so forth. And most of the value now in organizations is driven by that human, social, intellectual capital rather than just physical capital, the equipment that you would have in your machinery. But that is increasingly dependent then on the voice that people are having. So that has really changed the way that we view expectations and the impact that organizations is having.
Interesting. So transparency, the voice of potential employees. You also talk about, I think you made an absolutely compelling case for this. This matters to investors now, too, in a way that it didn't before. Well, can you talk about that?
If you think about it, right, Larry, I think you can actually take a very simplistic approach. So what is happening, for example, in the ESG investing market? Most actually of the products that one see out there are very simplistic views of the world, where they try to create some kind of a few metrics, and they say, how can I not invest in this? How can I not doing this? So they have a constrained view of the world. But actually, what if you have an opportunity view of the world, where you say, well, right, actually, where is the world going? How can I actually invest in where growth is going to be? Because those organizations are really providing solutions to what the world is needed. Solutions in having, for example, more affordable products. Solutions in having higher quality products. Solutions to actually help us decarbonize the economy. Solutions to provide clean water. Solutions to actually improve, for example, governance practices or having better data and so forth. So I think over time, what is happening is that investors are understanding that many of those issues the way that organizations are impacting environment, society, employees, customers. Some of them are actually becoming risks, that some of them are then actually affecting the ability of organizations to compete. And some other ones are actually real opportunities to understand what is the innovation process, what are the products and services that one is creating that is fueling growth in the future.
Right. What would you say to that CEO? You recount a conversation among executives who said, this all sounds great. I just don't have the data.
Right.
I don't have the data to be able to do this. I would, of course, answer them by saying they need to read the book. There's plenty in here. How do you respond to someone who says, I'd like to do this. I'd just like to get my hands on some data. I'd like to learn more. I need some data.
Right. So I think this is a good thing, right? Like, I think actually we need to be data driven. We need to be rigorous. We need to actually have an understanding. And that's why one of the first things actually in an organization, you need to measure the performance and the outcomes that you are generating right now. You need to step a baseline. And from that baseline, you need to actually then create an action plan about how you can improve on all of those dimensions, how you can actually improve your positive impacts, increase your positive impacts, and mitigate your negative impacts. So how can you actually create products and services that magnify your positive impacts, and how you can actually make operational changes and changes in your products that mitigate your negative impacts that ask as risk. So you need to see it from the perspective of growth and risk. Right? So we need to start from that. But I would say on the data perspective, and when I hear actually a lot of that as the fueling inside the organization, I say, I think it's also worth thinking about what is the risk of not doing something. Not only the risk of doing something, but actually what's the risk of not doing something? What is the risk of running a steel company right now and not thinking about green steel, for example? Well, actually, when some of your competitors are actually starting to producing and they are getting a price premium. What is the risk actually of being an automobile manufacturer that cannot produce electric cars that people like? Well, that is a pretty high risk, right? So when you actually go systematically across different markets, and then you go to food markets and say, well, what is the risk of fewer people actually consuming dairy milk and now preferring soy milk and cocoa, right? So there is always a risk of like moving, but also there is a risk of not moving. So the question of that is, how can you acquire the right data that will allow you to make better decisions, establish a benchmark, and establish an improvement plan?
Oh, what a great frame for this. Professor George Serafeim, thanks so much for joining us. The book is Purpose and Profit, How Business Can Lift Up the World. Hope you folks will get it at your independent bookseller. Thanks again.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm very pleased to have Mike Lamagna from Wharf Supply. Mike, tell us a bit about you and why you're an innovator.
Yeah, hey Larry, great to be here. I think innovating and entrepreneurship is just one of those things that's been kind of in my blood. It's kind of a little bit of an obsession with ideas and how they come to life, and looking at problems around us as a community and figuring out how we can solve them on a day-to-day basis.
Well, I'm excited because we met through my purchase of your amazing product. So Wharf Supply, tell us about Wharf Supply. You're wearing this terrific product. Tell our viewers about Wharf Supply and how this is a really cool, innovative, mission-driven company.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple years ago, I had the lifestyle brand as it existed. We made bags and accessories, and I kind of looked at our seasonal assortment. We always wanted to move towards apparel. We learned about recycled yarns that were being derived from reclaimed oyster shells and recycled water bottles. They were being combined through an extrusion process to create a cool recycled yarn. And I immediately was drawn to that process, not only from a consumer standpoint, thinking that that was really cool and something totally different, but also because I had grown up by the water.
Was on the water, on the ocean out of Newburyport, Mass, days after I was born. And we'd already been working to help reseed oyster reefs to help improve water quality up and down the Northeast coast. And marrying those two ideas was really a light bulb moment for me.
That is amazing. And Mike, this isn't the first time you've had to talk about this to an audience of entrepreneurs and potentially angel investors. Long Wharf has been on Shark Tank.
Yep. Yeah. Last year, we aired October 15th of 2021. It was a long process going into it. Really cool experience going on national television. But the coolest part was it made me and my sister, who's been involved in the business at an arm's length over the years, sit down and reflect on not only where we've come from, but where we want to go at the end of the day.
Amazing. So tell us about the products. What's next for the company? I'm excited because I'm now on your email list. I'm getting these really cool products, and I can't wait for the upcoming holiday shopping season, as I'm sure you're feeling as well.
Yeah, eagerly awaiting. So basically, at the end of the day, like I said, a couple years ago, we created the first fisherman sweaters made with recycled oyster shells, recycled water bottles, and natural lamb's wool. We now have a blend that includes cotton. We started with this story because fisherman sweaters were so near and dear to us growing up. This bird's eye pattern I'm wearing was a piece that we pulled out of my dad's closet every single year for events, for photo shoots. And it was always a conversation piece. So that vintage style mixed with kind of an eco-friendly and sustainable twist was what we were shooting for at the end of the day. In terms of business growth, for us, at Long Wharf, I pride myself in having built a community and audience of customers that care about the places that they're from and the places that they love most. And when they see us putting dollars back into highly effective impact programs that either reseed oyster reefs, fund shell recycling programs, or build upwellers, to house and incubate baby oysters up and down the coast, they really relate to that. And anything to serve that community through our product line is kind of what we're shooting for. So hopefully we'll move into shirting, outerwear at some point. We'll see if swimwear comes up the curve. We've got the ability to do footwear if the right partner comes along. So the assortment and product lines got kind of endless expansion on the horizon, but it's just about trying to do that methodically in the right way.
Mike, what would you tell other folks who are listening to this and want to be entrepreneurs? You've worked hard. You've tried so many avenues to make partners and connections and find funding. What advice would you have for our entrepreneurs who might be listening?
I would say two things. One is be authentic. I think today people really relate to those who get up and either in front of a camera or in real life and just tell it how it is. The internet and the way we live day to day is so transparent in 2022 and will be more transparent in 2023. If you're not authentic, people can sniff that out in a heartbeat. And that kind of leads me to point number 2, which is just find your community and what you care about. And if you tap into that in an authentic way, you'll have customers from day one. And that's the most important thing.
Well, that's terrific. Mike, the website for people who want to learn more?
Yeah, you can go to longwharfsupply.com. We talk about our story, talk about the Seawell collection, and it's an opportunity to get a great gift for the holidays.
Terrific. Mike Lamagna, Long Wharf Supply, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, everyone. Talk to you soon, Larry.
I'm so pleased to have Lynn Perry Wooten with us. She is the 9th president and first African-American president of Simmons University. Prior to that, she was a business professor at Cornell. She's a seasoned academic and an expert on organizational development and transformation, and she is also on a tear about leaders being prepared. So, Dr. Wooten, thank you so much for coming.
Larry, thank you for having me.
You've been thinking about these issues and studying crisis preparedness for years. Why this book now?
So I have been studying it, yes, for years, for a quarter of a century, and this is my second book on the topic. I've written 10 articles about it, but my co-author, Dean Erica James of the Wharton School, we started thinking that people really needed an update model of crisis leadership, and we started a couple months before the pandemic. And then the pandemic hit, and we had lots of time to write. She was hibernating in Atlanta, I was hibernating in Ithaca, and to put our 25 years of research together to say, how do you become a prepared leader? How do you take your crisis leadership beyond communication to really come out better in a crisis situation? And so it draws on theories, case studies, best practices, and tools that we have developed over the years.
And so you look at the 4 Ps,
Yes.
and some of them are new.
There's one that's new. So as I said, I spent all of my career talking and teaching in business schools. And often if you're teaching an MBA or undergraduate business student such as your daughter, you teach them the 3 Ps. So I taught strategic HR. That's the people P. I am an undergrad accounting major, so I know a lot about spreadsheets and financial statements. That's the profit. And even more recently, people have talked about the planet and that business leaders have to be stewards of the planet. And that's the 3rd P. But we don't talk about what Dean James and I call the 4th P, prepared leaders. How do you learn as a manager, a leader, a worker, a team member to be prepared for crisis, whether it be a tsunami and something from climate change, a natural disaster, it could be a shooting, it could be a pandemic. We all need to stand up to be the 4th P, prepared leader.
I liked so much your framing around communication as something more than just a lesson in communications. Talk a bit about that, and you and your co-author talk a bit about how people have traditionally thought of crisis is only about communication.
Yeah, you know, the research before we started doing it was solely about, okay, crises are going to hit. Managers need how to communicate to their stakeholder. What's the press release? You know, the flight has crashed or there's a hurricane coming. And so all of the time has been spent around communications. But crisis leadership is so much more than communications. And we discussed the phases about signal detecting and sense making. And once the crisis hits, how do you manage the crisis to ensure you're taking care of all your stakeholders? And then beyond the crisis, how do you get to business recovery and organizational learning so that the crisis doesn't happen again, or at least that you're a better organization? So this really is a leadership activity. Now, communication is a big part of it, but it's more than communication.
And it's also about leadership and finding the right people. I'm sure you're hearing a lot about this at Simmons and beyond, that we are, of course, in one of the most challenging workplace environments for recruiting and attracting and training people in 5 decades. How should a prepared leader be thinking about that challenge?
That's a good point. Once again, prepared leaders are always thinking about, what can I learn from history? What does the data tell me about the future? So if we look at the workforce crisis now and we approach it from a prepared leadership perspective, one is that 10 years ago, HR should have been predicting this, the strategizing about what's going to happen demographically. And why am I saying that? We knew at some point the baby boomers were going to retire. So how was the workforce planning for their exit? We knew some government policies was going to cause the shortage in the workforce. We know that the generation under the baby boomers, my generation, Generation X, is the smallest generation ever. So there wasn't enough for them to go around to be employed. And then the speculation about we still can't get the workplace right for women. A lot of the people who have exited have been women because they've been frustrated with the pandemic, the she-session, the caring responsibilities. So what are prepared leaders doing to strategize for the workforce? They're looking at the numbers. You're rethinking jobs. I heard you talk about, for example, we have to reimagine work as always not being physically there. We're having to start to let younger people prepare them to take on jobs that before we wouldn't, and train them to be responsible. As baby boomers exit the workplace, prepared leaders are trying to archive their knowledge and do succession planning. So HR is definitely a prepared leadership strategy. And, I lead a women's college, and we talked about the power of women's schools. And prepared leaders are thinking about, how do I make more women-friendly workplaces so
Right.
women want to come back to work?
And what are some of those challenges? You talk a lot about diversity in times of crisis. I thought that was just a terrific way to frame it. Talk about that a little bit.
Right. So while we were writing the book, you have to remember that diversity became salient to us because we were not only in the pandemic, we were in the social reckoning. But we actually started this research. We were young assistant professors. And we started it with the Texaco thing and the Texaco discrimination, and how discrimination lawsuits are really major crisis. And we've been tracking them, like I said, over the 25 years, looking at all different types. So gender, race, disabilities, and age discrimination. So we've thought a lot about what diversity means and how diversity can become a crisis in the workplace. And we give some examples, but we also wanted to give pathways of hope about the prepared leader is one who respects diversity, inclusion, and belonging. You're creating a culture where all voices can be heard. You're creating a culture where collaboration is prioritized. And you're constantly looking at all the stakeholders you're serving during the crisis and making sure you're building trust and doing well. And so we give lots of examples in the book, and our talks about when we were leading both of our universities during the crisis, it was very inclusive culture. I had everybody at the table 3 times a week, the VP of facilities and the CFO and the CMO, anybody you can think about, because we needed diverse voices, diverse opinions to make sense of how to lead in the middle of a pandemic.
I liked your analogy to a prepared leader liking jazz music.
Yes.
And they have to be improvisational. And I thought that was just terrific. Who are some of the leaders today who are showing the way when it comes to preparedness and great examples of prepared leadership?
Right. So I spent most of my career at University of Michigan and spent a lot of time paying attention to the automotive industry, and really think highly of how the automotive industry pivoted and did that jazz improvisation. So when the pandemic hit, they had to shut down. And they said, you know what, we're no longer making cars, but we have this great manufacturing plant. We have the capacity. So let's start making PPE equipment that people need for the pandemic. So that's the thing, being agile, improvising, adapting. But at the same time, what we saw from a lot of our automotive companies is we weren't always focusing on the pandemic, but they were also focusing on what the future is going to look like and the investments we need for electric cars. So part of improvising is thinking about what I need to do today and how I adapt to what I need to do today, but I have to pay attention to the future too. And we love the NBA example. That's another one, and the bubble and how they pivoted.
What are you telling Simmons students? Knowing that we reach so many students with authors and innovators, what are you telling students to think about, to read, to consider to be a prepared leader?
Yeah. What am I telling them to think about and to read? I'm telling them to constantly scan their environment, and to be a prepared leader requires you to have a knowledge of your chosen profession or your life work, but also the world around you. So I'm starting with read the newspapers. That's become a lost art. I don't know about you,
Right.
but when I was growing a child, my father bought 3 newspapers home a day,
Right.
and I sat down and read every one. So read the newspapers. Know what's happening inside your country, your state, but also internationally. Pay attention to adjacent industries. I pay a lot of attention to the 3 H's for some reason. It's higher ed, hospitality, and healthcare, because
Wow.
those are all industries that are being disrupted.
Right.
I'm also telling my students to get out there and to really meet people. The pandemic we need to reopen the world again, and have a personal board of directors of mentors that can help you be a prepared leader. So even at my stage in my career, I have a wide array of personal board of directors that I'm constantly getting feedback from, all different ages, backgrounds, and professions.
Wow. Networking, internships,
Yes.
mentoring,
Mentoring.
wonderful messages. I want to thank Dr. Lynn Perry Wooten and her co-author, Erica James, Dean of the Wharton School, and recommend to everyone listening to Authors and Innovators, pick up a copy of The Prepared Leader from your favorite independent bookstore. Dr. Wooten, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me, and please do go to your favorite independent bookstore and pick up a copy.
Hi, I'm Julie Lammers from American Student Assistance, and I'm thrilled to be with you at the 6th annual Authors and Innovators. ASA is a national nonprofit aiming to change the way students as young as middle school learn about careers and navigate their education to career journey after high school. And we're really proud to sponsor this event as an opportunity to bring together leaders dedicated to fostering new ideas and innovations to tackle the pressing challenges facing our businesses and our communities. We're particularly excited about the great lineup of authors and innovators this year focused on the economy and the future of work. Because at ASA, we believe there's no one-size-fits-all path to success for students. And so we work every day to help young people find their path, one linked to their interests, dreams, and skills, whether that be college or career or maybe an entrepreneurship experience. Through this work, we hope to set young people on a path to career success that will help them pursue their passions and simultaneously build a strong workforce pipeline that can shape our economies and rebuild our communities. If you're interested in learning more about ASA, you can find us at www.asa.org. And we thank you very much for joining us at Authors and Innovators today.